Hello, everybody, and welcome in to another episode of Speaking Steagles, the premier Pennsylvania pro football podcast. I am Nick Vete. He is Ricardo Martinez-Paz. We are coming at you with another episode breaking down everything that is going on with the Steelers, with the Eagles. Just like last week, this is going to be an episode where we're going to have some stuff to talk about. Would have liked it to be some nice, easy wins for both of these teams. Clearly wasn't the case for the Steelers, who came away with the loss, and the Eagles definitely not the reassuring victory I think most people were hoping for, but they were still able to find the victory. That being said, Ricardo, how are you doing today? Back from Ireland. I imagine that was a time and a half, but how you doing, bro?
I'm a little sick, but for the most part, I'm good, I would say. Yeah, Ireland got me a little sick. Yeah.
Is it like jet lagged, or is it just like, I mean, going from country to country, I'm sure, what was the temperature even like over there in Ireland?
It was honestly kind of similar. It might have been a little colder in Poughkeepsie, but like just by a little bit. But it was surprisingly, it only rained a few times and like not for that long. So I think I got the best experience out of it, really.
You had a good time? That's the key.
Yeah, great time, man.
That's awesome, dude. Seeing all the covers that you and Jonathan, a fellow Marist College colleague of ours, had over there, it was awesome. And hey, the Marist women's basketball team came away with 2 wins, so pretty successful trip for you guys and everybody involved. But this isn't speaking Marist women's Red Foxes here. This is speaking Steagles. So let's dive into things. I guess we could start with the Steelers today. They ended up being the losing team, so we'll dive into them first. And this was tough. This was a tough loss to swallow on a lot of different levels. Yeah. One, because I said this was a game that essentially, going into it, was going to make or break their season. And whether that they were going to really get back into this playoff hunt legitimately, or if this was going to kind of be their last real shot at being relevant again in the wild card hunt. And to come away with the loss, not only to lose in this fashion to a division rival, but the way it happened too, where your offense, didn't look great, but it scored the most points that they've scored in, I actually wrote it down here, most points that they've scored in a game since week 11 of last season. First time they've gone over 30 points in a game since week 11 of that season. And we'll actually just start with that takeaway, is the fact that 30 points, the fact that it just wasn't enough for the Steelers offense. And I guess it's a little bit of a 2-1 here, because I'll go back and forth from the offense to the defense here. I'll start more on the offensive side of things. Like, look, I know it wasn't perfect all the time. The one example that you kind of have to look back on is the TJ Watt interception that set them up with prime field position in Bengals territory, and the fact that I believe it was a 3-and-out, and they ended up having to settle for the field goal rather than cashing in for a touchdown there. But even outside of that and a few other opportunities they had to punch the ball into the end zone, 30 points for what this offense has regularly done on the season should have been enough to come away with the victory. They ran the ball well. This is 2 weeks in a row now where we've seen them run really successfully. Najee Harris, for the second week in a row, rushed for 90 yards. And he did that this game on 20 carries, and they didn't turn the ball over once. So to not turn the ball over, to score 30 points, to rush for 90 yards and have a generally even time of possession battle, it should have been enough to win the game, and it wasn't.
Yeah, that's really disappointing overall. The offense did everything they could, really. Like you said, no turnovers, which I feel like every game there's at least one for the Steelers. And to have put up 30 points and not have a single turnover, I mean, that's just. I feel like you're gonna get to this next point pretty soon, so I won't touch on it, but on the defense, at least.
And again, it was kind of a 2-1, like I alluded to, and that ties right into the second one, where it's like the defense just let them down in this one, man. It's as simple as that, and it's tough. And like, I was even listening to Mike Tomlin's press conference earlier, and he didn't really go too hard on the defense, but it's hard to say, like, all right, I mean, the offense scored 30 points. Like, that's got to be enough for the Steelers defense to get in. The one thing he did harp on that really hurt was the fact that the Bengals had 2 drives in this game of 90-plus yards, and then they had a third that was over 70 yards. All of them they cashed in for points. And I mean, it's like, it just hurts when that much time is coming off the clock. They're really, obviously chewing up a ton of time and then also cashing in points, keeping the Steelers offense off the field. And this was another point that hasn't really been talked about, but I feel like is pretty relevant. When we talk about, the preview of this game last week, when the Steelers beat the Bengals in week 1, it was because they were harassing Joe Burrow the whole game, getting to him, wreaking havoc. And this game, you look at the stat sheet, only 2 sacks on Joe Burrow in this game. So he was able to kind of sit back there, run the offense, throw the ball all over the field. And even without Jamar Chase, T. Higgins was able to go off for 9 receptions, 148 yards receiving. So just collectively, it hurts that the Steelers defense, which, I was on here praising them last week, saying, watch out, this Steelers defense is going to get back into form. They're finally getting healthy. They've got DeMonte Casey back. They've obviously got TJ Watt back. It'll only be a matter of time before William Jackson III is put on the active roster, even though he wasn't activated this week. And now to sit here and see them as healthy as they've been all season and let the team down and give up 37 points in a game where the Steelers offense really did anything you could have asked them to do. A couple minor nitpicks is what you could have asked for more out of the Steelers offense. This should have been enough to win the game. This should have been enough to put the Steelers at 4-6, and this should have been enough to put the Steelers back in the wild card hunt, and it just wasn't. And it's extremely disappointing. And it's just one of those things where it's like now you kind of have to look at the season, and it's going to get into my third takeaway a little bit. But now it's like, all right, now you kind of have to sit back and reassess and say, like, let's get real about where the Steelers team is, because I've been Mr. Optimistic through all of the close losses, all of the games they should have won, whether it was against the Patriots in week 2 or against the Jets in week 4, or whether it was against the Dolphins or whether it was against whoever else it was that they should have come away with the victory, and another one-score game that they could have won, that they should have won, and that they didn't. And that's the difference between playoff teams in this league and teams that are going to be sitting home watching the playoffs on their couch come January, come February.
Yeah, I mean, 355 passing yards allowed, and 4 touchdowns. They picked him off twice, Joe Burrow twice, but again, that wasn't necessarily enough to really like that. That's the shocking thing, really. I feel like the defense has been like you said last week. They played really well, and you were praising them and all that. So like where do things stand now with this defense? Like what do you expect like going forward after this sort of performance?
It's tough. I think the biggest issue for this team right now, and I think it even kind of goes beyond necessarily, what the stats show of how many yards they're giving up through the air, but it's just this secondary, just there's not enough pieces there, man. And I know Ahkello Witherspoon, he's been banged up for a good portion of the season here. And, it's not like he was having a great season to begin with beforehand. Levi Wallace has definitely disappointed a little bit. He was the free agent they brought over from Buffalo. So, outside of Cam Sutton and Minkah Fitzpatrick, who obviously, somehow got back on the field just a week removed from, having appendicitis, it's been disappointing to say the least, because I didn't expect the secondary to struggle, as much as they have really in this game. And I think you can kind of pinpoint they've been able to survive with their secondary not being as good as it was expected. The defensive line was really more of the concern coming in. How would they do stopping the run? And that hasn't been an issue of late, but I feel like it's just one of those things where it's like, I don't want to pin it all on the secondary too, because it's like, even when TJ Watt was out, that was the golden excuse was, oh, well, TJ Watt will come back and the defense will get back to normal. Well, he was in there and, it still wasn't good enough. So now it's kind of like, all right, it's like maybe this defense just flat out isn't as good as we thought they were going to be. And, this is kind of going to lead me right into my third takeaway here, which is, I think if we're getting real here, the playoffs are now out of the conversation. And, I think there's definitely people who were on that train earlier than I was. I was definitely someone that was, holding out hope to a certain extent, but also holding out the idea that, hey, it was like you get to 4-6 and you beat a division rival Bengals twice in the same season, a team that you're going to have to leapfrog at some point. It would have been feasible. Now you look at it, they're currently tied for the second worst record in the NFL at 3-7. They, in order to make the playoffs this year in the AFC, you're going to need to get to at least 9 wins and maybe even 10, given, the AFC is kind of deep this year too, the way that it's all shaping up. And, you're absolutely going to have to win your next 2 games. I'll get into that a little bit later when we look ahead to their matchup against the Colts. But when you look at the teams they're going to have to jump here, they're going to have to jump the Colts with a better record than them, the Chargers with a better record than them. There's like 3 other teams that are also 3-7. Not to mention, let's say you feasibly jump all of those teams. You then also have to find a way to jump the Bengals, who are the Bengals, who are 3 games up on you in the loss column, the Jets, who are 3 games up on you in the loss column, and the Patriots, who are 3 games up on you in the loss column. All 3 of those have the tiebreaker over Steelers. So if I'm being real at this point, I think we're at a point where we can say, this is kind of it for the Steelers in their playoffs at this point.
Yeah, I mean, what do we think about like I don't know if even winning season is possible at this point. So like, what did we expect now, like for the record to end at least?
So I was thinking about this. I mean, I don't really want to give a record prediction per se at this point because, like, I think if I'm being realistic, I'm saying they're probably going to be on the top end, on the absolute top end at this point, 7 wins. But I think realistically, given that they have 3 wins, I think realistically maybe they get 2 more wins. I think 5 wins is somewhere that's realistic, just because it's tough because they, the games, a lot of the games they've lost have been 1-score games. So it's not like they're just, out of games. It's just, they're just falling short, which to me is a sign that, yes, they're not a playoff team, but they still can get up around, in my opinion, 7 wins being the top end.
Right.
I mentioned it before, these next 2 games at Indianapolis, at Atlanta, I know they're on the road. If you want to have any hope at being 500, you've got to win both of those. And I'll shoot you straight. If you have any, and I know Mike Tomlin, what he's preaching in the building, he's still saying, hey, we're not, giving up on this season. We're going into every game, finding a way to win. And that's going to be the goal, 1 game at a time. Don't look far ahead. But, at this point, given what their schedule is, in order for them to be any sort of relevance whatsoever the rest of the season, they've basically got to win all of their non-division games. That's Indianapolis, Atlanta, Carolina, and Las Vegas. Those are their 4 non-division games. That would get you to 7 wins, and then you would have to feasibly win 2 of your 3 division games left to get to 9. So it's not feasible. I'm not saying that that's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. But that's really where they're at, and they've shot themselves in the foot too many times for them to really be in the playoff conversation at this point. And I think kind of what you alluded to, and kind of what I alluded to. This is lining up to be Mike Tomlin's first season finishing below 500. Something that I think you actually predicted at the start of the year.
Yeah, I did. I think by 1, I think I predicted 8-9 for the season. So.
And honestly, they very possibly are not even going to get to that.
Yeah,
it's looking like they're not going to get to that either. So, it's rough, man. It's rough. I mean, for Steelers fans, I've been optimistic all season, but I just think it's one of those things where you get to the point where, like, you just can't turn your head away and not read the writing on the wall.
Yeah, right. It's a tough pill to swallow.
This is where they're at, and I mean, like I said, everything kind of hinged on this game against the Bengals. So, now you've put yourself in the position where basically every if it wasn't already, every game is basically a must-win game if you have any aspirations for the playoffs. But I don't know, it's not an optimistic sign right now, and yeah, it's looking like the Steelers are trending towards a losing season.
Right. Yeah.
So. I don't have much more to add either. It's disappointing, and we'll get a little bit more into the Indianapolis game in a little bit. But let's shift gears and talk about this Eagles game. I'm sure you're gonna have some stuff to say on it. So why don't you get into it with your first takeaway?
All right. Yeah. So Eagles. Yeah, I can hear the disappointment in your voice, man. But yeah, I mean, I'm disappointed in different ways in a sense, but. Eagles got the win barely. I'd say my first takeaway really is Dallas Goedert's presence is clearly missed. I think. I mean, you talk about Jack Stoll, the backup tight end, who was more of a blocker, if anything, had 1 reception for 7 yards. Then Grant Calcaterra, who's who was expected to have like a bigger role this year as a pass catcher, didn't even log a stat. So, the middle of the field presence was lacking very clearly. I mean, the offense stalled on several drives, and really was Hurts just looking towards the outside and maybe more towards the slot receiver. So it wasn't pretty. It was just it looked like Hurts was missing him and the offense missed him overall. I mean, Goddard is I believe before his injury he led like amongst all tight ends in yards per catch, yards per reception, something like that. And before that, he had 544 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. So, I mean, he's a big part of this offense. Like, he's used for screens, he's used for blocking, used for, like, a lot of plays. So, it's just not promising that these two tight ends couldn't step up, fill in the shoes for Goddard, who's arguably a top 5 tight end this season, I would say. But I don't know.
We were even talking. I don't remember if it was last episode or maybe a couple of episodes ago, but just how he was kind of being slept on as one of the best tight ends in the NFL. And really, if he wasn't in that top tier with the Kelce's and the Kittles and the Mark Andrews, he's in that tier kind of right below. I think when we were giving our season preview, our position breakdown, I think we even kind of both had him in the top 10 of tight ends. So I mean, I think it was one of those things where it was almost like I don't want to say we were taking for granted because I don't think we were, but like you kind of saw this week, like, man, without him, you can definitely feel that his presence is missed.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I couldn't watch the game, but from all the things I've read, that was one of the biggest takeaways from just about every single person. That Goddard's presence is definitely being missed right now. Mm-hmm. So that's not encouraging. Something to work on, I guess. I don't know if they even consider signing someone. I don't know who's out there in the free agents. I looked this up, and it doesn't seem like there's anyone really worthwhile.
Not much going on.
No one's going to replace him. No one's going to like Goddard's just that big of a player in this offense.
I think it's one of those things too where it's like at this point you just kind of need I guess it would be Calcaterra, right? Is the guy that you're looking to step up?
Yeah. He would be ideally, but didn't really do that against the Colts. So,
but what I'm saying is I think that's more likely going to be the solution than bringing someone in and expecting them to learn the system and then make an impact. I mean, by that point, Dallas Goedert might be ready to come back.
And then am I still here? Okay, then my Wi-Fi just glitched a little.
We're good. I don't know if it's on your end or my end, but yeah.
Okay. So my second takeaway really is despite 2 turnovers, Jalen Hurts led the offense to victory. I mean, the first turnover was Miles Sanders failing to block Yannick Ngakoue, which led to a strip sack and fumble and led to 3 points for the Colts, 13-3 at that point. The second one was A.J. Brown, who fumbled after the Eagles had recovered a fumble of their own, and they could have gotten more points. Instead, the Colts got 3 more points. At that point, it was end of the third quarter going into the fourth for the first one. Kind of all on Hurts, 48 total yards on the first drive. I believe he had 26 rushing yards. And then that obviously the long 22-yard passing touchdown to Quez Watkins, which put him, which cut the margin to 13-10. And then the second one was a 7-yard go-ahead rush TD. I mean, that was just kind of him putting the team on his back and saying, I'm never giving up. I'm not giving up on this game, even though the first 3 quarters were just so ugly all around. I mean, he finished the game with 190 pass yards, 86 rush yards, and 2 total touchdowns. Like I said, it wasn't pretty, but at the end of the day, Hurts got it done. The offense got it done. And I mean, a win's a win in the NFL, and they avoided the upset to the Jeff Saturday's Colts.
That's exactly it. And I think I even literally put that exact terminology in the the little blurb on the Instagram post that I put for this. It's like the Eagles, find a way to win a game in the NFL, which is all, a win is a win. And as long as it's going in that side of the win-loss column, not everything's going to always look pretty, but, especially if the Eagles are kind of sputtering for a little stretch of games here, you got to be just, take the win and don't question, especially when you see a team like the Cowboys who are right on your tail, or the Vikings, who I granted they lost this week, but still when it comes to that top overall record, you take the wins over the losses, even if it comes in ugly fashion.
Yeah, for sure. And the Eagles still atop the NFC, and of course, like you just said, Cowboys giving the Eagles a boost by beating the not just beating, just absolutely destroying the Vikings, which was the biggest shock of the week for me. I just didn't see that.
Do you feel it's a boost though? Because at the same time, you've got the Cowboys kind of nipping. I mean, if I'm an Eagles fan, and I'm curious what your perspective is, I see the Cowboys blow them out like that, and I say, man, if the Cowboys have figured something out, or a little fire got lit under their asses after that loss to the Packers, I don't know. I don't want that being the team that's chasing me in the division when you guys have another game against them. No,
that's true, but I don't know. Like it's so interesting how the NFL works. And the Cowboys last week lost to the Packers in OT, and then they go out and absolutely dismantle the Vikings. So a part of me is like, okay, I don't know if they can keep this up. And I don't know their schedule off the top of my head, but can they just keep this up consistently is my thing. And I'd say it'd make me a little nervous after that win, but it's I know
the Cowboys are playing on Thanksgiving this week, and then I'm trying to pull up their schedule right now.
They play
then
Giants,
the Giants. They're playing the Giants. I might have misspoke there. But then they've got Indianapolis, Houston, Jacksonville before their showdown with the Eagles. So
those are all winnable.
They're winnable. They're winnable. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I don't want to look too far ahead of that, but it's going to be interesting to see if they kind of continue to win it in not easy fashion, but we'll see if they continue to kind of look as good as they looked against the Vikings here.
Right.
So do you have any other takeaways? Because I have like 3 different questions I want to run by you.
The last one, the Eagles defense held up. 4 sacks. 2 key ones. Hassan Reddick's 14-yard sack on Colts, 3rd and goal. Limited them to a field goal, made it 16-10 for the Colts. And obviously, Eagles went on to score the next drive. And then Brandon Graham's 7-yard sack on the final Colts possession forced a timeout and 4th and 16. And then the Eagles won the game, closed that out. Allowed fewer than 100 rush yards, although the first drive wasn't pretty. Jonathan Taylor had 22 carries, 84 yards, a touchdown, 3.8 yards per carry, and the Eagles defense allowed fewer than 300 yards. So overall, a better performance. They didn't allow as many long drives as they did against the Commanders. So again, the Colts offense isn't anything special other than Jonathan Taylor. So as soon as they figured him out and limited him after that first drive where he scored, I think the Eagles started to, I guess, find a bit of a groove in a way.
At least defensively to a certain extent,
for sure. Defensively.
Well, and I actually wanted to ask you this. This kind of ties into something that we didn't get a chance to talk about last week, but the additions of Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh. I'm curious what your opinions are on that. Do you like the move? Who do you see being used more? What's the fit alongside Javon Hargrave and Fletcher Cox once Jordan Davis also comes back into the fold? How do you see all that kind of shaking out on the defensive line? And obviously it's not great. Jonathan Taylor still got the touchdown at 84 yards, but like you said, once they settled into a little bit of a groove, definitely limited him more in the latter half of the game.
Yeah. I think they were both good additions. Linval Joseph, I guess, is a bit more of the nose tackle, more of that Jordan Davis role. That's where I expect him to be. Ndamukong Suh still has gas in the tank left too. And he's better as a pass rusher as well. So, and he even got a sack with Linval Joseph, which I thought was kind of cool that they both split a sack on Matt Ryan. But in terms of how this plays out once Jordan Davis is back, that is a very good question. Man, it's tough. Hargrave is still going to start. Jordan Davis will start as well. And I think it'd probably still be Fletcher Cox as those 3 as like the defensive tackle / nose tackle position. Even though like Fletcher Cox has been a bit inconsistent, I mean he just knows the system better. two at this point. So I think it'll be them three, and then rotating Linval Joseph and I mean they still have Milton Williams too. Now that I think about it, and he can play more defensive end as well. So
well, I think you also just have to like to the fact that because you're gonna now have, I don't want to say a surplus, but you have kind of different options that you're going to be able to keep guys fresh going forward now, because you'll be able to rotate them in, and hopefully with that, you'll also get just the best out of guys when they are actually on the field. And all the best teams, they're the ones that are constantly rotating their defensive linemen. So now I think the Eagles kind of have that luxury with a step up from what they were deploying before they brought in Joseph and Ndamukong Suh. So I'm definitely with you. I think it's definitely one of those things where it's like, hey, give props to Howie Roseman. He saw something that was a little bit of an issue, something that he thought needed to be addressed, and he went out and took care of business. So, I don't think there's much more to say than it's like, hey, this guy is all in on taking care of business and doing what needs to be done to secure, this Eagles roster going forward here.
Yeah, I mean, Eagles run D definitely looked better than last week. Actually, the last 5 weeks overall. So, yeah, it's definitely. I mean, patchwork, but it still it helped. It boosted the defensive line overall. So,
and you do have that insurance there in case anybody else goes down or Jordan Davis is out longer than expected.
Right.
But my next question, flip it to the offensive side of the ball now. Something that I'm monitoring, and I don't know if it's necessarily a big deal yet, but this is the second week in a row now where Miles Sanders hasn't really been utilized that much. Only 13 carries for 47 yards. The week prior, it was 12 carries for 54 yards. In 3 of the last 4 games, he's had less than 15 carries. Is this something that is at all on your mind at all, that they're kind of looking away from using him to a certain extent and getting away from the running game? Do you want them to get back and focus on, run game first? I'm just curious if this is even something that's a big deal or just something that, I'm picking up on that isn't really worth noting.
Well, I just think it's annoying. It's kind of frustrating, especially when you have these offensive linemen, like arguably one of the best. I don't understand why the Eagles don't run the ball more. I don't like Miles Sanders is still very talented. He's healthy. And I don't know. Like I would expect him to get at least 20 carries, like at least most games, right? Like I know there's a rotation, but even then, the running game I feel like overall the last few weeks has not been used very much. And again, that annoys me. It's more reliant on Jalen Hurts, but I don't know.
I just feel like it's one of those things where if they get back to it as being not necessarily run first, but like make it even, kind of like you said, give like Miles Sanders the rock 20 times a game, get him touches, and I think you'll start to see a little bit more of that balance come back to the offense. Things will open up for your wide receivers, and I don't know. I think you could start to kind of see the point scoring come back a little bit. So
I think they should go back to it. That's sort of a point I'm going to get to in the preview for the Packers game. But yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Sounds good. Yeah, I don't really have much more to add there, but it was just something that I've kind of picked up on, and I'll save it a little more for when you touch on it when we preview the Packers game. My last question. This is just weird because I feel like I've seen it a lot everywhere, and if it was my coach doing it, it would rub me the wrong way. But Nick Sirianni kind of getting all excited with the fans in Indianapolis and talking in his post-game press conference about how we did it for Frank Reich. I mean, what do you make of all that? Like, we got the victory for Frank Reich, the former coach of the Colts, and hyping up Eagles fans and being so emotional about it after the game. I mean, I don't know. It just kind of seemed a little bit weird for me that it was that, kind of that important to him, that big of a deal to him. What'd you make of how invested he was in getting this win for Frank Reich?
Yeah, that's definitely more of a hidden personal thing. I guess he had a really strong connection with them or whatever, and he must have felt that like the Colts firing Frank Reich was unjust, and then hiring Jeff Saturday was kind of a slap in the face sort of thing, kind of an insult. I mean, I personally am like, whatever. It's just like someone who like Sirianni clearly was and still is probably very close with Frank Reich. So I mean, I don't. Other than that, I don't really look very much into it. I don't know if he told his players that before the game was winning for Frank Reich. Like many of them definitely were there. during the Super Bowl run. So I don't know if that's served as motivation for this team overall, but for Frank, right? I mean, for Sirianni, it definitely did.
Yeah, I don't
don't have
know.
much on that.
It was just I hear you. It was just a weird vibe to see like a coach talk about like that much of a factor being like something he's so invested in against the opponents. It was weird to me, but I guess at the end of the day, hey, they got the win. And like you said, unless he's preaching it to his players in the locker room beforehand, I guess it's really not a big deal. And now you just kind of move on to the next week, to the next game, and just kind of leave it as that. And you know what? They got the victory, so it's like, hey, can I really nitpick? Can I really complain that much?
Right. Yeah.
All right. That being said, you have anything else to add on this game against the Colts? Because otherwise, I will move over and preview the Steelers matchup against the Colts this week.
Nah, go for it.
All right, sounds good. So in Indianapolis this week, obviously the Eagles there against Indianapolis this week. Mike Tomlin today in his press conference even said the first thing that he brought up when asked about this Colts matchup was, kind of what you even talked about last week, the need to first and foremost contain Jonathan Taylor. They've got some decent playmakers outside of Taylor. I mean, Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, Paris Campbell, they're all nice players, but Jonathan Taylor is really the one you need to game plan for first and foremost. If you can slow him down, Matt Ryan is clearly just a pocket passer at this point, not the same quarterback he was down in his prime in Atlanta. So you contain Taylor first and foremost. You take a dimension away from this offense. And that's the first thing that kind of has to be the main focus.
Yeah.
So I'm looking to see if the Steelers defense can do that, shut down the run, make this Colts team one-dimensional. And, then on the other side of the ball, you know what? I said this last week. This is a Colts team. I know they brought in Jeff Saturday. I know it's going to be like, hey, Jeff Saturday's never really had any real coaching experience before. But this is a Colts team that's still in the playoff hunt one way or another, whether we want to admit it or not. Like, they're still in the wild card conversation. Right now, they're sitting here 4-6-1. They're on the bubble, really. I mean, 6-4 is what's in the playoffs right now. So you talk about a couple more losses to the Bengals or the Patriots. I mean, if they can find ways to win football games, they'll still be in the conversation there. And their defense is nothing to slouch at. They've got talented guys all over the field. They've got a talented defensive line. They've got some cornerbacks who are solid. Obviously, Stephon Gilmore, former top cornerback in the NFL. Rodney McLeod, the former Eagle. Julian Blackmon, Kenny Moore II. And, I was just looking at the numbers about, how are the Steelers offense going to attack this Colts defense? The Colts, surprisingly, are in the top half of most defensive categories. 5th in yards per game against, 7th in pass yards per game against, 11th in rush yards per game against, and 11th in points per game against. So they're a solid team, and I think that for the Steelers, the best thing for them to kind of do, if you can limit the Colts offense, turn around, hand the ball off to Najee Harris, which they've done the last 2 weeks. Let him get up above 90 yards again, control the clock a little bit. That's what I think is really their best kind of formula to go out and win in a game that I think is going to be pretty low scoring, and I think is going to be a little bit of a dogfight here. I do think that the offense, it's going to come back down to earth a little bit. I don't want to say come back down to earth because it's not like they were outstanding last week, but to score 30 points was the best that they've been in literally since a year ago last season.
Yeah.
So I don't expect them to replicate 30 points against a better Colts defense than what the Bengals have, frankly. So that's kind of the way that I see them kind of going about attacking this Colts team and trying to go out and get a win in a game that really, this week and next week, even though they're both on the road against the Colts and Atlanta, these are 2 games you got to win.
Yeah, I kind of expect a lot of punts in this game. I actually sort of highlighted maybe it would be a battle of the kickers who makes most field goals.
Which for the Steelers, that's Matt Wright because Chris Boswell out with an injury.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I put down here too. Because it looks like it's going to be a defensive struggle here. And then the other thing I think is it could be the winner of the turnover battle that wins ultimately. And these teams definitely can. These defenses definitely can produce those kinds of turnovers, and it's going to play a big role in this game.
Yeah, I definitely think that the turnover battle is something that you highlight that's actually going to be pretty big here. I didn't really think about that, but that's actually a very true point. Is it's going to be, can either of these teams just set their team up in prime field position on the other end? I'm going to look right now. I'm just curious what the over/under is for this game if they haven't posted yet, because I can't imagine it's that high. I mean, honestly, what could it possibly be? What's your? It's posted at 39 right now, so I mean, they're definitely saying we could see this being, kind of like a 13-10, 16-13 type of game where it's a battle of turnovers, battle of field goals. But, and that's the thing is I feel like that's definitely going to be the case with the Colts defense kind of slowing down the Pittsburgh attack. It just has me a little concerned after how many points the Steelers gave up last week to say, confidently say, hey, they're going to be able to go and just shut down this Colts defense. And like I said, it really starts with Jonathan Taylor first and foremost. And you'd really love to get William Jackson here and help out the secondary, specifically the corners, which has kind of just been, Cam Sutton at this point by himself out there at the cornerback position with obviously Levi Wallace, who's been underwhelming. And Kella Witherspoon has been, hasn't been anything to write home about when he's been healthy this year.
Yeah. But then again, the Colts offense isn't the Bengals offense. They don't have nearly as many, talented players. I mean, still quality, but I don't think it might be easier on paper, but
100%.
It's still going to be tough.
Yeah, they're definitely not the Bengals offense. And I also wonder if they can get to the quarterback, more than 2 times. They got 2 sacks last week against the Bengals. Can they beat up on Alec Pierce, the second-round rookie this year, and Braden Smith, who are the right and left tackle for the Colts? I'm wondering if Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt can kind of go to town on those 2 guys. Obviously their interior offensive line is a little bit better, but that's kind of what I'm wondering is what they can do here, specifically on the tackles in this game.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's all that I kind of have for the Colts in this game. I think I might have misspoke. I meant Bernard Raymond if I said the left tackle of the Colts wrong before. But either way, it's the rookie third rounder. That's my bad. I think I might have said Alec Pierce before.
Yeah, you did. But
good my bad on that one. But nonetheless, it's still the rookie left tackle that I'm looking to see if they could take advantage of. And then obviously Braden Smith, who was a second round pick back in 2018. Still a talented, nothing to slouch at, but come on. I want to see these guys get to the quarterback a little bit more. I think that's going to be kind of key to dominate the offensive line.
Yeah.
Or dominate the trenches first and foremost.
Yeah, for sure. I don't have much to add on that.
Sounds good, man. Let's turn things over to the Eagles game here and their battle here in Week 12.
All right. Where do we even start? I guess which tight end steps up, if at all. Because like I said, Cal Cassera didn't do anything. Jack Stoll didn't do anything really other than that one catch. So really more production in the middle of the field would be kind of nice for Jalen Hurts to have some sort of avenue, a different target other than A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Quez Watkins. They're all good and all, but still it adds another dimension to have, another one, like a tight end in the middle of the field, just catching those intermediate ones, even short ones just for like converting first down, stuff like that. Just the simple stuff. Like if Sirianni and Shane Steichen, the offensive coordinator, can like figure out some like easy plays for these tight ends to catch, and maybe build up that confidence as the game goes on, then, maybe this offense will play a bit better than last week, which is sort of what I'm also looking for. They had under 345 like yards per game, which is their average on the season against the Colts. And now they're facing the 23rd ranked defense, which is 21st in takeaways with 11, middle of the pack in sacks with 22, 10th against the pass. So that's sort of their strong suit, but 28th against the run. So this is where I was getting at with the Miles Sanders point. This is the game that Miles Sanders should have, should be involved way more than in recent weeks.
Yeah, I think that that's honestly probably the best formula to go about it. And I mean, obviously they lost Rashawn Gary a couple weeks ago, who was so key for the Packers, trying to stop the run. So I'm with you. I get the ball back to Miles Sanders. Let him go back to work. I mean, honestly, when the Eagles were finding some of their best success early in the season, it was because they were, having a great balanced attack, both running the ball and obviously, picking up yards through the air as well. And, Miles Sanders kind of leading the charge on the ground, getting into the end zone, rushing the ball. That's what I think I'm with you. I think that's what they kind of have to get back to. And just give him the rock. Give him the rock 20, 25 times a game. And especially in this one, get back to that and see if you can kind of control the pace of the game a little more and put some points on the board and carry out to some sustained drives. And, even though Aaron Rodgers is having a down year, keep him off the field. Keep him off the field and just last week was tough. Last week was really tough. I mean, because you wanted more and you wanted to see that bounce back game, but maybe it's just going to be a week later where they get back to a formula that they can really, kind of succeed in. The Packers defensive line is clearly much worse than what you were going up against last week against the Colts, who are the 5th best team against the run when it comes to yards per game.
Right. I mean, it just has to go through Miles Sanders. I mean, you can involve Jalen Hurts all you want in the run, which is kind of what he did towards the end of the game against the Colts, but it just there has to be more production in the rushing attack. So we'll see where that goes. And sort of on the opposite side of the ball, but relating to running backs, stopping Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon is definitely going to be the biggest thing. More so Aaron Jones. He's more dangerous, more one-cut sort of back, and also can catch out of the backfield. AJ Dillon is just a punisher. I mean, he'll just run through you. So really containing those two. I feel like I always say this. It's just containing the running attack from the opposing team. That's just how it is every single week because that has been a weak spot for the Eagles for a while now.
Aaron Jones is definitely a different beast, though, because he can beat you in so many different ways, whether it's, getting the ball out to him in screens or out in the flat or, giving him some tosses to the outside or getting creative up the middle with him. He's just a guy that you definitely can't let him get going because kind of like Jonathan Taylor or Dameon Pierce, who we've talked about in some recent weeks here, or I guess even Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson in the game they lost to the Commanders for that matter. He's a guy that if he can get going, that's really where the Packers offense can come into their own because he opens things up for Aaron Rodgers and these young receivers to kind of throw the ball. And I wanted to ask you, any concern about, maybe game planning for Christian Watson a little bit? Obviously, he's had a bit of a coming out party the last 2 weeks, 5 touchdowns combined in the last 2 games. Obviously, 2 weeks ago, he had that big 4 reception, 107-yard game. Is that someone that you're kind of game planning a little bit for? Or are you, that's kind of a little bit more on the back burner and you're confident in Darius Slay's ability to kind of shut him down?
He's probably the one receiver I'd be looking to key in on for sure. But I think prioritizing the run game is probably where I'd look at first. And then the other stuff kind of comes along. If you stop the run, then it's one-dimensional, and then you can drop your guys back in coverage, which the Eagles are fairly good at, although the last 2 weeks may have been they're a little shaky, but I think being back at home, they might play a bit better with the home crowd, especially on Sunday night. So really, I think it's like Christian Watson is up and coming and still going to get better. I just think the running backs are more of a priority. They should be more of a priority than Watson and the other young receivers Packers have.
Yeah, I'm with you for the most part there. He's definitely the first guy you're game planning for. And yeah, I don't think I really have much more to add on this game specifically, unless you do.
No, that's all I got really. So I mean, just no turnovers because last 2 weeks has been six of them combined. I limit the penalties. Obviously easier said than done, but those are the keys to winning a game. So
this is definitely the game you want to see the Eagles get back on track for because the following week, I mean, I don't want to look ahead too far here, but the following week you're going to have the Tennessee Titans coming to town. And speaking of running backs that can really just get going on you and run all over you, we'll be talking about Derrick Henry and that Titans rushing attack in a week. So let's see if the Eagles can get back on track here. And then, we said a couple weeks ago, let's get to Thanksgiving and then let's evaluate where we see things kind of going from there. with this Eagles season. So hopefully they can get back on track. Hopefully they can limit things against the Packers. Then it'll be exciting to kind of look ahead to probably what's going to be their toughest opponent so far on the season, given how the Titans have played recently and given the strengths of the Titans compared to the weaknesses of the Eagles and all that good stuff. So that being said, I don't have anything else more to add, Ricardo, unless you do.
Packers are a desperate team right now. That's a dangerous thing. So the Eagles got to avoid that. So
they do certainly have to win, and we will see how that goes. It's going to be a big game for the Packers, and it's going to be important for the Eagles to get back on track. And that being said, that's all we've got for this episode. Ricardo, you have a great Thanksgiving, man. And everybody out there, whenever you tune in for this, eat some turkey, eat some stuffing. I'm going to be eating some sweet potatoes. That's my favorite meal on Thanksgiving, by the way. Ricardo, what's your favorite dish on Thanksgiving?
Oh, stuffing. I have to go with
stuffing. See, I love the sweet potatoes. Yeah. I love the sweet potatoes, but my grandma's stuffing, that's something different. So, sounds good. We'll also get some Thanksgiving football. So, we're all always going to enjoy that. That being said, peace out, everybody. Enjoy Turkey Day. That's all. Bye-bye now.